I have quite a large collection of comic books. Don't get too excited, though. These are almost exclusively Archie's Sonic the Hedgehog series. Yeah, I know. The Archie Sonic the Hedgehog comic was weird. Most people vaguely aware of it probably know this already. I've wanted to do a big deep dive covering the entire series for a long time now, but I want to do it right. Because for as strange as it often was, it also had some very high highs. I don't want to skip over all of the great elements and just talk about whatever's happening here. I want to do this series justice. I want to give it the time and effort that it deserves. You can't just show something like Sir Connery the Horse and not spend like 40 minutes just talking about this character and his sacrifice. May he rest in peace. The point is, this is going to take a very long time, so for now, let's talk about a different strange Sonic comic. This wasn't the only Sonic the Hedgehog comic series published by Archie. There were actually a bunch. A Knuckles spin-off series, Sonic Universe, Sonic Boom, not one but two Mega Man crossovers. People talk about the main Archie comic being weird, but more people need to talk about the Sonic X comic. The one where Dr. Eggman is a Spanish wrestler. And the one where we have such incredible interactions as, "Is that Shadow with you?" "Yeah." "Isn't he dead?" Long story. He's better now. Cool! Sonic X was an anime in the early 2000s where Sonic and friends are sent to Earth and they go on adventures with their human friends. Which, when you word it like that, sounds a lot like those new Sonic movies. As a kid, I liked it, because Sonic was in it. My bar for enjoying something was pretty low. A lot of people hated this show, though, for a couple reasons. First, the humans. Chris Thorndike isn't the most compelling character. He's a sad and lonely kid with busy parents who make time for him when they can, which is pretty often, but otherwise he only has tons of friends always by his side, his loving grandfather, and all the staff taking care of him in the giant mansion they live in.
Oh, the misery!
When Sonic and friends get stranded on Earth, they stay with Chris. And the series covers the events of the Sonic Adventure era games, but they just replace Sonic characters to insert Chris into scenes instead. It's kinda like Kingdom Hearts. Chris is meant to be a stand-in for kids in the audience, like, whoa, I can put myself in this kid's place and I can pretend I'm best friends with all the Sonic characters. Except, I didn't live in a giant mansion and have a cool butler. I can't relate to this kid. I think a lot of people like Sonic stuff to see Sonic in it, not really the boring human characters. But the same people who complained about this show love those new movies, so what do I know? The other problem people have with Sonic X is for kids' entertainment. The people responsible for Brock's famous jelly donuts, a lot of One Piece censorship, and of course that clip that they played every single year with anime characters singing the American national anthem.
And now, the stars of 4Kids will sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
I loved 4Kids when I was a kid and the stuff was for me. Go-Go Riki, Robots, Viva Pinata. As a dumb little kid, I didn't realize they were censoring Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. I was just enjoying myself. This is how I spent my Saturday mornings. I do actually like a lot of the voice actors from the dub, but overall their Sonic X localization wasn't the best. They removed some pretty impactful scenes and had some weird edits, so most of the people who liked Sonic X were kids who didn't know that it was being changed, and when those kids grew up they heard from older fans online that Sonic X is bad actually, and you should hate it. I don't think it's bad, I don't think it's great. There have been much better and much worse Sonic shows both before and after X, which leaves it in this really weird spot where nobody on either side really talks about it anymore. So if Sonic X isn't really talked about much anymore and the main Archie comic is sort of this niche thing within the Sonic community, yeah, a lot of people I think don't know that this one even exists, or they just don't care. It's formatted a lot like the show, where Eggman has some scheme, and by the end of that issue or the following one, Sonic and friends save the day. There's some pretty neat stories, and a lot of just weird ones. It makes sense to start at the beginning, but I didn't start until like number 7. And honestly, the first story arc when I started reading, I don't really have a whole lot to say about. Chris is having his birthday party at some amusement park in Paris with all of his friends and family. Oh, this poor child. Eggman shows up, and he turns all the rides into big robots, and then there's like a big robot battle. They fight all the robots. Speaking of battle, one of the only real things of note here is the appearance of Emerald from Sonic Battle. And I loved that game as a kid, so I thought this was a really cool inclusion. Big the Cat punches Eggman in the face. That's pretty cool. That's like the only other really notable thing here. Coming back to these, it's a pretty, okay couple of comics. But also, you know, me at age 26 is no longer the target demographic for this. I thought this story was cool when I was a kid, so I have a lot of nostalgia for these. The story directly following is a lot more interesting. Sonic and friends are trapped inside a simulation and go through the entirety of the first Sonic game on the Genesis, level by level, and they have to abide by the rules of the game. A lot of the early mechanics in the Genesis games aren't really a thing in like the actual Sonic lore by this point, so it's fun seeing them react to things like how rings worked in the video games, or the shield item where Sonic doesn't know what it is and tries outrunning it. Fan service and bringing back stuff from old Sonic games isn't anything new nowadays. Nostalgia became the face and driving force of the entire brand for about a decade, but the Sonic X comic was years before Generations, or even Sonic 4. This sort of thing didn't really happen. And at this point, classic Sonic, as like a separate entity, wasn't really around either. During this era, all the nostalgic throwback stuff just used the same modern Sonic, which I think is sorta cool now because they really started to divide this stuff years down the road. Nowadays, if you suggested an adaptation of Sonic 1 featuring characters who didn't exist until the 2000s with their modern designs, Sega would have you executed. Seeing all of them hating Labyrinth Zone is a lot of fun though. This level was terrible. They did this for Sonic's 15th anniversary, which brings me to the holiday specials, which were just something else. For Halloween, they did this Ghost Possession 2-parter. I thought this was pretty cool as a kid. There's a St. Patrick's Day one with a giant robot leprechaun. But the one that we really need to talk about is the Christmas special. This one is wild. Chris tells Sonic and friends all of the Christmas lore and about Santa and all that. And Sonic isn't too sure about this Santa guy's existence, because nothing besides him could ever possibly be that fast. That's the only reason he doesn't believe in Santa. He's just petty. He spends the whole holiday season arguing with everyone about it, saying it's stupid, and Chris's grandpa is just like, oh my god, can you shut up? Sonic goes so far as to run to the North Pole just to prove that Santa isn't there so he can go back and tell Chris that Santa isn't real. This guy is the ultimate hater. What is this guy's problem? And then this guy, who is clearly the real Santa and not Eggman dressed up, tells the world that if Sonic the Hedgehog is not delivered to him by Christmas Day, then nobody in the entire world is getting presents this year. And now, everybody in the world is after him. He literally runs across the entire planet looking for a place to hide, but every single country wants Sonic dead because they aren't getting presents otherwise. Even Chris, who is like the #1 Sonic worshiper, is like, dude, you gotta turn yourself into Santa. He's not gonna give us presents. You're gonna ruin Christmas. You're selfish, Sonic. What's your problem? Ruining Christmas for everyone by being alive. This is the worst character in all of fiction. Eventually, Sonic turns himself in. Grandpa Chuck brings the press to Santa's workshop at the North Pole to expose Eggman, and he's like, you're not Santa. The real Santa's way over there in the distance. This has just been the most, like, I don't even know. I don't even have a word for it. I just need to take a nap. I need to go lay down or something. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm Sonic. Sonic the Hedgehog. Don't believe in Santa. The government's lying to you. The Christmas issue is my personal favorite, but another really iconic one is the first appearance of El Gran Gordo, a professional wrestler who is definitely not Eggman again. Also, while Chris and Chuck are watching TV, Sonic has to interject and tell them professional wrestling isn't real, guys. What is this dude's problem? Chris is still the worst character, but honestly, Sonic's pretty close. Anyway, Eggman starts wrestling as a way to get money so he can make more evil robots, but he also just really likes being a professional wrestler. Eventually, he has enough money, and his robot helpers are like, alright, we're done. And he's just so sad. He also speaks fluent Spanish. Not really important to anything, just funny enough to mention. For his final match, though, he's going up against Sonic the Hedgehog, and Knuckles the Echidna is like, dude, this El Gran Gordo guy is like unbelievably powerful. We need to get you into shape so you can even stand a chance against him. I haven't really brought up Knuckles until now, because I haven't really had a reason to. He kind of does nothing in this comic. This is like my favorite guy. He doesn't really do anything. The most that he does in this entire series is train Sonic to fight a professional wrestler. Turns out El Gran Gordo's been cheating in these fights. The sparkles on his cape are actually little machines that slow down and weaken his opponents. Sonic has him beat, but lets Eggman win anyway, because El Gran Gordo is Chris's hero and he just doesn't want to see him lose. He doesn't care if his best friend loses. This is a toxic relationship. So for a while, Eggman actually quits being a villain and just becomes a full-time wrestler. But this guy takes control of all his machines and tries to kill the president. El Gran Gordo saves his life, American hero, but by the end he reveals to the world who he really was and retires the mask. For a little bit, and then he comes back later down the line. He makes a fake Eggman to commit crimes during one of his fights to make people think that they actually are different people. During his fight, he's getting completely crushed, but he sees Chris's face as he's losing, and that gives him the will to overpower his opponent and... This is just funny. Why does Dr. Eggman just love wrestling so much? Like, how do you come up with this? He stopped being Eggman for so long that he actually just gets locked out of his base and all of his robots are after him. So Gran Gordo and Sonic have to team up to break back in. And you know, it's easy to joke. El Gran Gordo is just such a out there weird idea, but unironically, these are the most fun stories of the entire comic. A lot of these are just, here's a giant robot, Sonic will stop them. There's not a lot to these, not a lot of continuity, and most are pretty forgettable. But anytime they stop to do a wrestling story, it just gets so much better. There are some other decent ones throughout the series run. Chaos pops up at one point. This is a pretty cool one, and it's the only time we get to see Super Sonic in the comic. Another pretty memorable one is where Vector the Crocodile turns into a giant monster. Sonic has to throw these pills into his mouth to shrink him, and the comic legally had to end with a, "Hey kids, be careful with pills and only take your recommended dose." And Sonic X concluded with its 40th issue. Sonic's at a tea party when Shadow the Hedgehog and Metal Sonic appear. Two characters who have never appeared previously anywhere in this comic. Timeline-wise, Shadow was actually dead at this point in the Sonic X anime, and Metal Sonic had never been anywhere in the series. See, this is actually Shadow the Hedgehog from the main Archie comic universe. During a fight between Sonic and Evil Sonic from another universe and a bunch of other guys, Shadow warps Metal Sonic away so Sonic has one less thing to deal with. They end up in the Sonic X universe, and by the end they warp away once again. And then, in a completely different third Sonic the Hedgehog comic book series, Shadow reappears with Metal Sonic in that, and they're in the Sonic Rush dimension, where Metal Sonic is finally killed by a firing squad. Archie's Sonic X ended kind of abruptly. I remember one day, the guy who ran my local comic store just said that he wasn't able to order new issues anymore, and said that something called Sonic Universe was gonna be available soon. And sure enough, it kinda just ends here. The first issue of that new Sonic Universe comic is the conclusion of that Shadow Metal Sonic battle across 3 separate comic series. I don't think an official reason for its cancellation was ever given. Some speculate it was due to rights issues with some of the non-game characters. But honestly, the last issue released in December of 2008. The show it was based on ended in 2005. Sonic X just wasn't relevant anymore. The overall tone and the Sonic games that inspired this series that they were really based around weren't really the direction of the franchise anymore. And this comic was the last time the X original characters have officially appeared in any media. Goodbye, and good riddance. While I think Sonic Universe ended up being the far better series, I do also have a lot of nostalgia for X. And reading them now just really takes me back to the golden age of 4Kids TV. I always looked forward to waking up on Saturday mornings to watch some questionably censored anime dubs, and the 4Kids website with all the stamp collecting and the random flash games on there. So that's the Archie Sonic X comic. Maybe next year I'll have enough time to talk about the main Archie comic, but if not, we'll talk about the Mega Man comic or something. Happy holidays, everyone. And remember, no one is getting presents if Sonic the Hedgehog is not at my doorstep.